All right, everybody, welcome back to the Problem of the Day series. This is an Algebra 2 concept where we're going to be talking about having an I, right? So just want to do a quick recap over here. So what is I? Okay. So I is the square root of -1, okay? And then, so this is kind of a good thing to keep off to the side. What is I squared? Well, that's the square root of -1 times the square root of -1, which ends up being, whenever you have two square roots and they have the same thing underneath, the square root disappears, or it cancels out. Now, I to the third. Well, let's carry down what we have. That's -1 times the square root of -1, which just makes negative square root of -1. Or you could call it negative I. It's totally up to you. And then I to the fourth neatly works out. So that would be, well, what's I squared and then squared? That would be -1 times -1. And it just ends up just being 1. Okay, so this is kind of just an aside here talking about i's, but just like square roots, well, it is a square root, you don't want it in the denominator. So ideally, your first thought should be, well, maybe I'll multiply the top and bottom times I. But what you end up having is kind of a weird scenario because you have to distribute that. And the reason I like this problem is because this is using our fraction skills. So this is the denominator for both of these terms. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is separate the two terms. So -2 over 6i. And then we have -3i over 6i. So minus 3i over 6i. And we're going to tackle these separately. This first one has I over I, so those are going to go away. So really we're just left with -3 over 6. And now this term has an I in the bottom, so that is where we multiply top and bottom times I. So I'm going to carry this down, so that'd be -2i over 6i squared. Well, what was I squared again? I squared is -1. So that ends up being -2i over 6 times -1 is -6. So these are our two terms, and they can be simplified. So let's do an equal sign over here. This is going to be our answer. So -3 over 6, that's a fraction that could be simplified to what? Exactly, -1/2. And then this, the -2 over -6, right, is a positive 1/3. 1/3 I. Okay, so simplify means basically don't have any i's in the denominator, and you could have multiplied top and bottom by I, it would have got you the same answer, but this is a much better way of doing it. Whenever you have two terms in the numerator and one in the denominator, you separate it into two terms, with the common denominator. This is your answer. I know it still looks kind of weird, but things always have complex numbers are in this form. There's some number, and then plus or minus some other number, and then I. The I term always goes second. All right, so hopefully this helps with Algebra 2. I know a lot of you are working on it's called an imaginary number, because you can't really take the square root of a negative number, so we call it I. All right, so keep the questions coming, and hope you're having a good week.